when I saw the sort of offer of people coming to talk about some of the heritage Swindon stuff, I thought I'd come and waffle at you for a while. So yeah, I've made a few notes. I won't forget to make sure that I sort of make some sense. Well, I should tell you a little bit about myself. So I'm not Swindon born or anything. So Nelly says you won't stone me for that or anything, so hopefully I'll be okay. I was born and grew up in Winchester, and obviously if you're looking for a place with heritage or something, then Winchester has it by the spades. I think when you're young, I mean, it's a bit long ago now to remember, but when you're young you sort of take for granted where you are, and for me it was certainly things like I was baptised in Winchester Cathedral. Both my grandfathers were vergers in the cathedral. My grandma used to dust the cathedral, so on a day like today, 30 odd years ago, showing how old I am, no, it'd be more than that now, I would be helping her dust in the cathedral, just wandering around the pews and stuff, playing there. And so, yeah, growing up in Winchester was a place that, I didn't realise how much an effect it had on me in terms of interest in heritage and so on. I was involved in like the pageant of the 900th anniversary of the Domesday Book. And that was really exciting stuff. And it was really interesting at that point, being a young child, you sort of see the winners as the heroes, and they're the ones who do everything right. So I was a big, fan of William the Conqueror. I thought he was great and everything. Of course, now, 40, 50 years later, sort of my views changed quite a bit. And like most people, it was a really good teacher at some point. Mrs. Miles, her name was, when I was 7 or 8, I think, who really got me into not just history, but also the stories that go with it. And the way that, the stories have a habit of changing history, or maybe altering the facts, shall we say. So later on, when I went to university, at university I studied performance, so drama, dance and music. One of the big parts of that was storytelling. And so that sort of opened my eyes up more to stories from different places, different cultures and so on. And so one of the things that always interested me was the relationship between stories and history, and how, I think I was saying earlier to Nelly, a little grain of truth in stories, and even if the story is a big, huge, fabricated lie, it can get people interested in the truth, where the truth comes from. So fast forward a bit, after a degree in performance, so obviously the world was my oyster for jobs I'd have after that. I was very lucky. My mum was a nursery school, ran a nursery school at the time, and I'd always loved teaching as well, working with children. So I actually spent the next 20 years working in education. Everything from ages 3 to 18. Everything from a nursery nurse to a head teacher. So for those 20 years, it was just the most wonderful job working with children, the energy and everything you get from them. And that's what led me to Swindon. So in the early 2000s, I think it was 2006. So it is 20 years now, isn't it? Yeah, so 20 years I've been living in Swindon. I had a job in North Swindon, a new school, and interesting, when I took the job at the school, it was all very much about trying to get children and the families involved in the history, in the ethos, in the culture. What am I trying to say? That sort of thing, the thing you can't quite tangibly get hold of, but the thing that actually makes a place what it is. Some people would say heritage, some people would say it's the heebie-jeebies or whatever. And of course, Swindon being such an interesting place, and I found that in the time I've been here, is the fact that Swindon is very young. That's probably why I fit in so well, I think. It's a very young place. I also do casual work at STEAM, at the Train Museum, and I started that about 7 years ago it was. So I left teaching in 2019, just before COVID. It's a good idea, isn't it? Luckily, the reason I left was to pursue my interest in things like storytelling, particularly arts. I work as my day job, if you like, is working as an artist illustrator. Someone asked me once, what's the difference between an artist and an illustrator. I think an artist draws what they like, an illustrator draws what they're told to. That's sort of the way I sort of see it. And so a lot of the time, with lockdown and everything, I had the chance to actually hear a lot of people's stories. I work a lot with people who self-publish, and had the opportunity to have access to lots of stories in different cultures and so on, and different ideas, and have the opportunity to illustrate them. So yeah, fast forward then, during the time as well, I worked for Quorum Life Education as well, which, if you haven't heard of, I've forgotten his first name, but Quorum, the charity, it's a fantastic charity based in London, set up by a guy called Quorum. It's a bit like everyone has heard of Bernardo's, haven't they? Basically, it's the same sort of ilk, but Quorum was a gentleman, was a bit rough, apparently he was, a bit rough, a boat builder, who in the 1700s, I might get the years wrong, but he would go through the streets of London, and at that time, children who were born out of wedlock and so on would be just dumped in the gutter, left to die. Foundlings. So he set up the first foundling hospital in London, which I think the drain pipe still exists at the museum there. But yeah, the guy Quorum, he set up this charity, and through the charity I had the opportunity to go around Gloucester talking to children about health and education. The idea was, giving children the opportunity to do the best in their life. So yeah, I mean, what's this got to do with ghost stories? Well, I think one of the interesting things about Quorum was he was very much in the ilk of, I think he was even friends with Charles Dickens, the whole social injustice and the rise of Victorian interest in stories, the supernatural and so on. So yeah, so the last 6 or 7 years I've been working with STEAM, and the one thing I have realised working with STEAM is that what we have here in the Railway Village and what we have here in the works, that is Swindon's identity. To me, I'm being wrong is common ground for me, so forgive me. But this is with Swindon expanding and growing. To me, it's vital that people identify with the Railway Village and identify with the works, because this is the heritage, this is the story of Swindon, this is the reason why Swindon is where it is. So yeah, I'm here tonight to sort of talk a bit about the ghosts of Lydiard. And so linking with my work in STEAM, I had an idea, because Lydiard is such an amazing place. I live in Purton, very close to Lydiard. But I never actually went to Lydiard. Moved here in 2006. Never actually went to Lydiard until 2009, when my daughter was born. We needed someone to walk the baby, as you do. And it was the first time I'd ever been there. And I was like, wow, this is an amazing place. A beautiful parkland, a beautiful house and everything. Why hadn't I heard of this before? Why didn't I know about this? And so for me, Lydiard has been a very special place, because obviously those memories of my daughter, who's now teenage and doesn't want to speak to me very much anymore. She's lovely, actually, in case she ever hears me say about this. But yeah, to me, Lydiard is a place that sort of goes so well with Swindon, as I mentioned, being so new, because Lydiard is so old. I told you I waffled, didn't I? I lost my train of thought there. But yeah, it's so old. So it's just that whole, the sort of juxtaposition of this new, vibrant place that Swindon is. I know we can all say horrible things about Swindon. I don't need to, because plenty of other people say that. But the place, it is so vibrant. It is so interesting, Swindon. With that juxtaposition of somewhere that's been around but it's mentioned in the Doomsday Book, Lydiard. It's been around so long. I just think it's just so interesting. So yes, I put forward a proposal to my boss at STEAM to say, it'd be great to utilise the house for a Christmas story, to get, you could do the things, like like they did in Bristol in the museum, have little things appear in the museum, little jokes and stuff left by the character of the story to sort of get children into them. Anyway, they didn't want that. They'd rather have ghost stories because we all know about the Victorian tradition of telling stories, ghost stories at Christmas and gather around. You know, we don't have any films or Netflix in the Victorian era, so come around and have ghost stories. But not just any ghost stories. They didn't want just any old ghost stories in Lydiard. They wanted stories that were about the stories or the ghost stories of Lydiard. And so the first thing I had to do was to search and find the ghosts of Lydiard. What stories were there? And so I've got right here, actually, I went on the internet. Google's great, of course, other search machines around. Joined the Lydiard, Friends of Lydiard. They're a fantastic resource of all the archives of Lydiard. And I found the stories of the ghosts. Put them all together here. That's about it. And so if we're getting people into Lydiard and to tell them ghost stories, you've got to have a bit more than, about 10 or 12 lines. So there was, basically everywhere I went, there was a list of ghosts that you might find there. And a lot of the lists were created by park rangers in the 1940s. So again, how true would they be? So this is the list of ones that I found. So the sighting of a 17th century gentleman who was give directions to visitors. Not much of a story there. There's some actual quotes from people who said, "I did not ever see a ghost, but my mother did, but only my mother. She said she was very small. When she was very small, she saw a figure in a dark brown cloak. He was entering a room, sometimes halfway up the back staircase. That was the kitchen, and always seems mischievous." There's nothing else there. You know, I just couldn't find anything else. Some of them get some really good. There was a lovely. We talked earlier about settings and sounds and atmospheres. The most famous ghost there is Sir John St. John. So many St. Johns, I've got to make sure I get the right one. But Sir John St. John, who's been seen in the library, and when you're in the house, the temperature drops. All of a sudden, it goes freezing cold, and then you get the sweet smell of tobacco wafting through. Now, that could just be that they haven't paid their electricity bill, and someone's taken a party cigarette just to keep themselves warm. But you know, that's all there is. There was an account from a housekeeper which I found really interesting, and the first real story we got from Lydiard about how she used to talk to John St. John, to talk to his spirit in the room. So she'd be cleaning, just chatting away to him. You shouldn't say it was just something she did to pass the time, but she went off on holiday for I think it was 2 weeks. And when she came back, she was told by the stand-in, the relief housekeeper, that all sorts of things had gone wrong. Bulbs had broken, shelves had come down, things had gone missing, keys had snapped in locks. And on hearing this, the housekeeper went into the library and tore a strip off John St. John. Tore some, "Don't you behave like that," she says, "you can't do that." There was never ever another reported breakage or anything in the house. That's a nice little story there, that one. The other case we've got a phantom seen wafting around of a woman in white, a phantom coach, a drummer boy beating a drum. That was it. There's no meat on the bones for them. And so this is where I took the role of storyteller very seriously. And Chris would have heard me say this before, but a friend of mine who's a storyteller, she went to visit family of her husband in Greece. Her husband's Greek, of course. Going through customs, she had to sign in what your profession was, and she wrote down storyteller. She thought she'd be really good. She'd find what storyteller was in Greek and write it down. The security guard, what do you call them? Customs, thank you. The customs official took a look at what she was writing and said, "Are you sure you want to write that?" He says, "Because what you've written there says liar." And apparently one of the direct translations of storyteller into Greek is liar. And so I always use that as a caveat with my stories, that if I do say something wrong or something you don't believe, then, because I'm a big liar. So yeah, that was the great thing about having these sort of skeletons, if you like, of stories, be able to put some meat on the bones of them. And I wanted to try and make sure there was some mention of the grain of truth, something that could actually, if somebody heard the story, could actually say, "I don't think that's true," but they could find, use that as an impetus to go and create their own story, or find out what on earth I've been waffling about. So a couple of the stories I'll share with you. The story that probably the sort of famous one we used was this story here. So this was a set of images I created for the storytelling. When I was writing the stories down, I thought I put them all in a book. So I put them all in. I didn't bring enough to sell, I'm afraid. If you want to pay me more for these, I don't mind. But no, if you want to search my name on Amazon, then you can find the books. But I'm not here to sell anything, really. If you want to buy something, all better. But I always see my role as a storyteller is to take something I've heard, pass it on to you, and hopefully you can pass it on to someone else. Because we're all creating ripples in the water. And so that's the way we can. That's all I wanted to do. So yeah, this story, the mistletoe garland, which is a story I've heard many years ago. Actually, I didn't hear it. I read it. One of the jobs I did before I was a teacher was I was a zookeeper. Never worked with animals or children, they say, don't they? In Marwell Zoo, near Winchester. And anyone who's ever been there, it's in a great park. And right in the middle of the park is the house, Marwell House. Lodge, I don't know if it's got a particular name. But above one of the fireplaces was written the story. And my dad, he was working there at the time as well, as maintenance electrician, getting the things ready for the what do they call it, Winter Wonderland or Wildlife, getting or sorting out the lights for that. And I remember helping him and reading up on the fireplace the story. I wouldn't do a spoiler alert, tell you what it said on this fireplace. I'll tell you this story now. Cold, grey morning. The sky almost as grey as the sea. The coolness of the spray splashing the faces of the family travelling across the channel. The seagulls swooping overhead. The father stood on the deck, along with some of the other sailors. Down below, the daughter, feeling unwell, being buffeted by the waves. So unwell, she's curled herself up in the great oak chest, carrying their belongings. Beautiful oak chest, thick planks of wood hewn together and carved ornately. On the lid, a mistletoe garland, carved beautifully on the lid. The daughter, her stomach churning as the waves rocked the boat back and forth. The year 1067. Her father has been called across the sea to help some of the landowners of the recently conquered Britain. One of the landowners has been allowed to keep his estate. Why? Why has it been given to one of the victors? I don't know, I couldn't tell you. Perhaps you could tell me. So, after the voyage across the sea, they had to travel all the way from Sussex across the tracks of southern England, a very dangerous place to go. Luckily, no real incident on the journey, but All the time the girl sat in the oak chest to try and keep herself warm. Not the nicest place, England. Not the nicest weather. Not the most comfortable roads. Eventually they arrive in the estate. Right on the edge of a tiny village, huge woodland, a parkland and a manor house, Lydiard. They are greeted by the owner of the manor, Alfred of Marlborough, I believe his name was. Again, I could be wrong. He was greeted by the father of the daughter. The father of the daughter spoke a tiny bit of broken English, and Alfred replied in a tiny bit of broken French. And just by breaking a little bit of ice, the two of them started a very warm friendship. And as their friendship and time grew, it seemed like a whole new family had arrived. Both travelling all the way from France across those seas and already being settled in the place. Years march on. We now arrive at the year 1080 and springtime. A brimstone blue butterfly floats on the warm spring breeze. Across the bluebells, round the primroses, and lands on the hand of a beautiful young woman who was once a small girl curled up in a wooden chest. This beautiful young woman, well, she has been spotted by some of the local gentry. Some of them have not too honourable intentions towards her, but luckily one of them, a relation, a nephew of the Duke of Marlborough, Alfred of Marlborough. Well, he takes the girl under her wing, protects her. Whether it be his gentlemanly ways or his dashing young looks, as time marches on, the two of them become very close. The girl and the nephew, and they agree to become husband and wife. When should they have their wedding? A winter wedding. The nights are cold and dark. Need something to brighten up those short winter days and long winter nights. So it's like a winter wedding. Some of the local women gather flowers to decorate the hall, the manor house. Deer are culled from the woodland and cooked. And on the day of the day of the wedding, everyone's been looking forward to it. It's a crisp, clear morning. One of those mornings where it's so clear that the light shines on the frozen dew, the frost on the ground. It's like diamonds scattering around. And our bride-to-be, is looking resplendent in white. A beautiful white dress, topped off with a garland around their head with little white berries, a mistletoe garland. Her husband's breath is taken away when she appears. The wedding goes well. The two of them make a beautiful couple. The sun shines out throughout the day. And it seems to shine a little bit longer just for the two of them. When evening does eventually arrive and the fireplaces are roaring away, warming up the walls and the rooms of the house. The house is full of laughter, of celebration, of gaiety, of songs. The night wears on. Nobody wants the night to end. When the fires are starting to die down in the hearth, the wedding guests, decide to play a game. Hide and seek. The father of the bride attempts to hide, but doesn't do a very good job. He's a bit too portly and his stomach sticks out a bit from the curtains. The groom wants to hide, but no, ladies first. Of course, he lets his wife go and hide. Of course, she spent her entire childhood in the house, so they only give her a count of 100 to hide. So she doesn't find too good a place. Off she sets up the staircase. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. She takes her shoes off as she goes up the stairs to stop the clattering. As she reaches the landing, she looks out across the lawn. The bright moonlight reflecting off the frost starting to reappear. So then she has an idea. Opening up the window, taking the mistletoe garland off her head, she throws it out onto the lawn. It should land just outside the main windows, so if any of the guests catch a view of it, it will lead them off across the lawn. She then carries on her way up the stairs. 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42. Higher and higher she goes, right up into the loft. Now right up here she is. She creeps through the tiny hatch right into the eaves and starts tiptoeing along the beams. 78, 79, 80, 81, 82, 83. Right in the furthest corner, the very cranny, she sees a bundle of old carpets and cloths to hide behind. Keep her quite warm as well. So she goes in behind the cloths and putting them back, she spots a big wooden chest. She recognises it, the thick oak, and climbs inside. She pulls one of the blankets, one of the cloths around her to keep herself warm, and as she pulls, the lid smacks her on the back of the head. She falls senseless into the box. The box falls back into the eaves, and as she falls, her neck cracks. $100. That's right, yes. They've counted to 100. And now they've gone searching around wherever they can. Can they find her anywhere? They look behind the curtains, look underneath the tables, up the chimneys, no sign of her anywhere. They go out into the main hall, no sign of her in the main hall either. One of the guest spots on the lawn. Aha! There's her mistletoe garland. She's headed out that way. She'll be freezing. A few of them gather together some cloaks and furs and head out. The rest of them carry on looking round the house. A few hours later, the people who are set outside come back in. No sign of the wife. No sign of the bride at all. People are starting to worry, panic a bit. So the people inside haven't found her either. They're heading upstairs into the loft. No sign of her in the loft. Downstairs into the kitchens and everything. Fear starts to turn to dread. No matter how much they search, they never find her. But she is found about 700 years later, when the building is renovated into the Palladian style. One of the roofers comes across in a very, very corner of the attic a load of moth-eaten old cloths. Pulling them out of the way, he finds a chest. The chest's lid creaks open, and inside is a white dress. The white dress, now seen floating around Lydiard, sometimes through the corridors, down the stairs, trying to find the guests, trying to find her. So a bit longer than the story that was above the fireplace in Marwell Hall, but yes, the story goes that the bride on her wedding night goes and plays hide and seek, and gets herself locked in the chest. No one ever finds her. Now that story, I read it in Marwell Hall, but apparently there's a hall in Sussex that claims it was theirs. There's one up in Ripley in Yorkshire that claims that story happened in their very walls, underneath their very roof. Well, we don't claim it happened in Lydiard, but it might have done. It might. So yeah, looking at the at Lydiard, there were lots and lots of different different sentences, I should say, to give sort of ideas for stories. One of the ones I found most fascinating, and it's one that actually I was talking to one of the shop manager, I think it is in Steam. She was reading one of them, and one of the characters I used in the story of All Quiet on the Lydiard Front. Apologies for the title, but whilst Lydiard in the 1940s was used as a prisoner of war hospital for German prisoners. It's very interesting in that sort of snowball of looking in for information. They call it going down the rabbit hole, don't they? Going down the rabbit hole to find out more things about the area. You know, I found there was a translator there called, I think it was Wally Knight, his name. And yeah, the Hannah, who was reading the book, said, I know Wally. He was my German teacher in Commonweal. And yeah, that's where I got the name from. The German teacher, one of the German teachers in Commonweal was used as a translator for the German prisoners of war. Reading into the history of what happened while the German prisoners were there, I did find out that that 2 German prisoners did actually escape. One of the prisoners was found getting on a train at Morden, shot and killed. The other one has never been found. So there's our grain of truth. As far as I know, that is true, that only one of them was found. So what happened to the other one? What happened to the other one is another story. Because the house in the 1940s was seen as unfit for human habitation. Indeed, when I think it was the 101 Airborne, they were stationed there at the start of the war, the American Airborne, and they didn't actually use the house at all. But apparently some of them had gone into the house and, you know, sort of raided for any trinkets or anything. There wasn't much to find at all, apart from an old wooden crate with some really, really old Christmas decorations. Of course, the Victorians loved Christmas, didn't they? So they reckon it must have been like 50, 60 years old, so it could have been Victorian Christmas decorations. And they took them back to the camp, the American soldiers, and left them there. I think it was 1940, you'd have to, if everyone's correct me, please do. I think it was 1943 when it became the field hospital. So up until that point, it was the American soldiers were there. So when the German prisoners were taken there in 1943, when they recorded, actually, I think I've got some of the recording here. They recorded some of the findings when the prisoners escaped. They recorded, you know, obviously all the camp, the doctor was interviewed, the nurse was interviewed, and it was, yeah, Eric Schreiber, that was the one. So Eric Schreiber was the prisoner who'd never been found, and he originally was put into Lydiard because he had a badly injured knee, lost ligaments or something like that, and he actually had walking aids made for him by some of the workers from the railway works, actually to help him, you know, calipers and stuff made by the guys there, and the nurse. I didn't check the nurse's name because she was a real person, a nurse. What was her name again? I can't find it. I've lost her name. I must apologise. Oh no, here we are. Yeah, I know this was from Waddy Night. So he was interviewed, yeah, on the 6th of December. Yeah. So this was the night when the prisoners escaped. He said, I can only pass on what I ever heard from some of the prisoners leading up to the event. One of the nurses wanted to boost morale because these guys, you know, they're very fractious. Some of them were dyed-in-the-wall Nazis, some of them less so. And there would often be, you know, fights between the prisoners, some of them accusing others of giving in and not being true to the Reich and so on. So nothing out of the ordinary was reported, nothing that seems of any consequence. It was getting very, very cold towards the end of November that year. In fact, it was one of the coldest ever Christmases recorded at Lydiard. The mood in the camp was pretty sombre, dwindling daylight, frost everywhere. Nurse Bridgman had a suggestion of creating a sort of German Christmas. They'd come across the crate that they found, that the American soldiers had found before, and they did find some decorations, so some very old moth-eaten bits of fabric, ribbons and things like that. But they did their best to decorate the camp, to cheer up the German prisoners, brighten things up. A couple of guards did offer to go in and see if there's anything of note in the house or around and about. They did come across a pine tree, take a few branches off of that. In the crate, there was a strange bell. Now, most Christmas decorations are sort of bright gold, aren't they? Quite jingly, a bit ostentatious, if you like. But this was a very dull bell. Very, very dull. It was an old moth-eaten red piece of ribbon, even cracked at the edge, broken, and that's about as festive as it got. No jingle to it at all. And when Nurse Bridgman was passing it around, showing the prisoners, Schreiber, his face went white. He looked at the carvings on it, and it was like a switch had been flicked. He started shouting and screaming, very hoarse and very fast, and no one could understand what he was saying. He was taken back to his quarters by a few of the orderlies and tried to restrain him. In the end, the only thing they could do was actually inject him to sedate him. Nurse Bridgman asked some of the other prisoners. They didn't want to know about the bell at all. That was the night that Schreiber disappeared. They found in the snow footprints leading to the fence. The strange thing about the footprints is they were quite far apart, like he'd been running, even with a damaged knee. And the fence, well, the wire had been cut, but there was nothing he really could have used to cut it with. The other strange thing was the other set of tracks, just to the side of his. Little cloven hooves. Must have been a deer that had followed him. But yeah, 2 prisoners escaped, Schreiber being one of them, never found. Now that story, I probably should have told the first story that goes with it, about the German Christmas. Because in the Victorian time, of course, German Christmases were all the rage, thanks to a young prince. And word goes that the owner of the house at the time had ordered a huge crate of German Christmas decorations to be transferred from Salzgitter over to Lydiard. And in that crate was the Krampus bell. And of course, for anybody who's heard of the Krampus would know if you ring that bell, the Krampus will appear. Not necessarily in body, but in spirit. The Krampus, of course, to any German, would be accompanying St. Nicholas. As St. Nicholas travelled from house to house, bringing gifts to go into the stockings of all the good children, the Krampus would be coming with him with a stick to beat the children who were naughty, to chase the children who were bad, chase them out across the snow perhaps. So, yeah, some creepy stories. As I said, some of them could be seen as a load of nonsense, but little grains of truth in them. One of the other stories, I will just check the time. Yeah, I don't want to waffle on too much, but I won't tell you the story of this one, but I'll just share this one. I've shared it with a couple of you already, but this is probably one of my favourite bits of folklore, if you like, about Wiltshire, about close by. Lydiard, of course, does have a phantom coach that comes up and down the drive. Could that coach be bringing mail? Could it be bringing messages? The story goes that the coach was bringing messages from Naseby during the Civil War, bringing messages and letters from loved ones and news, because of course Lydiard, carrying on the war thing, Lydiard was used as a garrison during the Civil War, which always amazed me because Lydiard, if you've ever been into St Mary's, the church in Lydiard, amazing. That I couldn't believe when I walked into the church, the frescoes and the murals down the side, beautiful artwork. All the other churches were whitewashed by Cromwell. Why was that one left behind? Anyway, so there's another story there. But yeah, so the coach travelling through, Lydiard delivering the messages. The story goes that the messenger was so tired, having come all the way from the Midlands, he wanted to rest during the evening. So one of the stable hands offered to take the coach down to Cowan, to the coach in there to pick up some things. But sadly for the young coachman, who was, of course, due to be married very soon, he went down Lavery Vane Hill, just the other side of Avery. Lavery Vane Hill was the manor, if you like, the streets, for want of a better description, that were ruled by the Cheryl gang. The Cheryl gang were a famous, infamous group of highwaymen. They had a very novel way of robbing the coaches. They would do it in their birthday suits. So as soon as the coach travelled down the track, they would be confronted by more meat than a butcher's window. Out of the bushes would appear, I don't know how many, there's 5 here, could be several, naked men descending upon the coach. Now, I have no frame of reference, but I should imagine anybody being confronted by that sight, their eyes would either want to be somewhere else or on anywhere but the faces of the offenders. You know, there's far more exciting things than faces to see at that point, or far more worrying things to see. So the Cheryl gang were very successful, but the story goes with this one, they shot the poor stable boy. He died at the scene. But these terrible villains, well, they weren't just happy just stealing everything on the coach and leaving the poor guy dead in the ground. They actually went up the road towards Avery to Red Lion Pub. It is the Red Lion, isn't it? Yeah, the Red Lion Pub, and took a poor Walter, the village drunk, if you like. They took him. He was worse for the wear, self-inflicted, if you like, and comatose. They took him down to the scene of the crime, dressed him up in a tricorn hat, put the pistol in his hand, and left him lying in a stupor next to the dead body. The next morning, he was found, Walter, alive of course, the poor stagehand, the stable boy, dead. He was found by the local constabulary. Open and shut case. Walter was found lying next to the body, gun in hand, prints. He was taken before the magistrate. The magistrate, very busy at the time, opened and shut case. Walter was taken to the crossroads in Beckhampton and hung, despite protesting his innocence till the very last breath. Just as the last breath left his body, a messenger appeared, carrying the message that one of the Cheryl gang had been apprehended and had come clean, and that Walter was to be pardoned. Where was Walter, by the way? Swinging from the gibbet. And if you go to the crossroads at Beckhampton, in fact there's some sarsen stones there. Walter still walks around those sarsen stones looking for justice. I said I wasn't going to tell the story, but I ended up doing a bit of the story anyway. So yeah, I'll end on a high note there. I think you can't get any better than the Cheryl gang, really, can you? I won't reenact it, you're okay. But where next with these ghost stories? Well, I noted down from Jack kindly sharing his stories from Steam. For me, as I mentioned ages ago, about the railway village and the works, that's Swindon's soul, if you like. And if anything, just to have the chance to share these stories, to put them together, maybe to, as I said, to write them down in these books and to let them ripple on. That's really what I'm trying to do, in a way. So thanks very much again for inviting me. It's been a real pleasure to be here this evening. And if you have any questions at all, any stories, I've got my email address down on here, so if you'd rather email me or bend my ear or whatever, then please do, because yeah, for me the stories are the place that keep the history alive and everything. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.